Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this important discussion on the state of our utilities here in San Antonio. My name is Marina Gonzalez, and I'd like to introduce myself as your new president and CEO of the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Now, a few housekeeping rules, everyone. We're utilizing the Zoom webinar platform for today's event. If you'd like to submit a question for our panel, please do so using the Q&A feature on your screen. We will do our best to incorporate those questions from the audience as our time permits. On behalf of the Hispanic Chamber, we'd like to welcome our virtual audience members, as well as to take a moment to thank our sponsors who help make today's events possible. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Toyota Motor Manufacturing Texas, for their generous support. I'd also like to thank our event sponsor, IBC Bank, for their support as a gold sponsor. It's also great to see our chamber partners come together for such an important topic. So I'd like to recognize our partners and friends at the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, the North San Antonio Chamber, the West San Antonio Chamber, and the South SA Chamber of Commerce. And of course, our friends at CPS Energy and San Antonio Water System. And that's why we're here today, to hear directly from our utility leaders as to how they're operating safely amid COVID, to talk about the critical services they're providing, discuss their focus on helping customers during this difficult time, and how we, as business owners, consumers, and citizens, can remain informed on the top issues facing these agencies. Many of our members tuning in today know that just weeks ago, the San Antonio Hispanic Board of Directors took a formal position to oppose the recall CPS petition that, if passed, could jeopardize our economic stability and access to reliable, affordable, and secure energy. These important community conversations are crucial to ensuring that our collective understanding of how current leadership structures must remain intact in order for them to continue at the top of their class when it comes to service, affordability, reliability, and diversification. And so, our goal today is to provide an educational platform for our members and our community at large to hear directly from SAWS and CPS Energy leadership as to how their respective agencies continue to provide excellent services to San Antonio. On behalf of our Hispanic Chamber, I'd like to thank Paula Gold-Williams and Robert Puente for their participation today. To start our conversation, it's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Bob Rivard. Bob is the publisher and editor of the San Antonio Report and a longtime award-winning journalist and former newspaper editor. In 2012, he founded the Rivard Report with his wife, Monica Markley. It is now known as the San Antonio Report, serving as a nonprofit online news source with a mission to provide journalism and civic engagement opportunities to build a better San Antonio. Bob, thank you so much for being with us today to moderate this important discussion. I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thank you, and good morning, Marina, and congratulations on your appointment as CEO and President of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of everyone at the San Antonio Report, thank you for having us be part of the program. I also want to thank Dr. Erica Gonzalez, who I know is not here today, but the chairman of the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber Board, for her kind invitation. Paula Gold-Williams is the CEO of CPS Energy, CEO and president. That's a position she's held since 2016, but Paula's been at CPS Energy since 2004. She is the former treasurer and chief financial officer. Paula, welcome this morning.
Thank you.
Robert Puente is the president and CEO of the San Antonio Water System, SAWS. That's a position he's held since 2008. Robert, welcome this morning. And I have to say,
Thank you.
It's wonderful to be in person with a couple of people. We are properly social distance here today, but we're masks off and more than 6 feet away from each other. And it's just good not to be looking at somebody on a screen and in person, even if all of you are looking at us on a screen. So let's get right to it. Marina mentioned operating safely through the COVID pandemic, and I'm sure neither of you as leaders ever imagined that you'd be leading your organizations through a crisis and a challenge like the pandemic and the social and economic shutdown we've experienced since March. Paula, I'll start with you and then go to Robert. Talk a little bit about what that's been like, both internally for the organization, externally for the ratepayers, and more than half of them, I'm sure, of your 3,100 employees can't work remotely because of the nature of their work. So it's probably been a special challenge, and I hope that you haven't had a serious outbreak within CPS Energy during this time.
Well, that's a lot, and everyone's going through it. We thought we were prepared. We were watching the pandemic when it was, in Asia, and we were fist bumping and using disinfectant. We had our sanitizer everywhere, and we thought we were, because we have a pandemic program and we have a business continuity program. But of course, we all know this was the velocity of it, the intensity, the tragedy around this pandemic has been just overwhelming. And it was hard to make that transition. We're San Antonio. Our workforce is very focused on our customers. We are only, thinking about all the time what we can do. But we had to rethink every process we had. We had to rethink how people work and engage. And to your point, Robert and Bob, both have you here. We had to rethink how people can dispatch even from work. We used to bring everyone in centrally to locations. We have locations all around San Antonio. You could go to a location where you were assigned. You could get your materials. You can check your vehicle. But now people have to dispatch from home, and they have to dispatch in small groups so that they can work together. But they're still practicing. I have 2 masks. I have one here and one there. We've had physical distancing. We don't call it social distancing. We call it physical distancing, and we try our best to stay socially connected. We are very used to having town halls in person and all of those conversations, but we've been using virtual techniques. We've been sending messages. I send serious messages to the group about all the things that we need to do to keep them safe and keep our customers and the public safe. But I also try to make it light when I can. I have little bitmojis of things about washing your hands and doing things. So we've increased our communication, trying to make sure that they have the best information about keeping themselves safe. It's really tough when you leave work even. What do you need to do at home, and how do you keep your family, your children, and your parents safe? So we're constantly putting out that type of education. But we're an essential service. So we didn't close one day. And 24/7, 365 is what we do. We have made sure also that we keep all of our payment centers open. That was tough. We have had situations where customers, not knowing all the options that we have come in and actually said, I've been tested positive and needed service. And so we have a way and a process to talk to them and help them and give them alternatives. We now check temperatures. We do all those things, evolving along the way to make sure that we're doing the right thing and sharing information as much as we can. We've had health experts come in from different agencies and locations locally and at the national level, virtually, to talk to us, to keep us educated and keep us going. We are part of the essential service aspects of first responders. For example, firefighters really can't stop a fire oftentimes until we go turn off the lights. And so that's been challenging though for us too, because of course medical professionals need to have the best vaccines and tests and soon to be vaccines. But we're constantly trying to make sure again that we're at the table, keeping educated, keeping our people safe. We've had over 100 cases out of our 3,100 employees. We haven't had any deaths, thank goodness. We've only had 1 case of company spread, and that was recently. And I think that part of that is the fatigue of how diligent you have to be. You have to wear your mask all the time, but it's hot and our people are working constantly. They're in vaults, they're exposed to the weather, they're responding to storms. And so again, we just have to keep reworking our processes and keep that top of mind.
Thank you, Paula. And Robert, SAWS, like CPS Energy, is an essential service. I know that you both engage in exhaustive emergency preparation and planning, but nobody can ever anticipate exactly what's going to happen. And I think we forget sometimes that even if all of your workers are essential workers, they also have children and seniors at home, and the same issues all of us have had whether it's daycare, caring for seniors, just the stresses that this has put on the families home.
You're right, Bob. And, any public utility has to have an emergency plan just ready to go, whether it's weather related, hurricanes, tornadoes, whether it's power related. If the electricity goes off, our computers go off. And so this was a good opportunity for SAWS, unfortunately, to find out how our emergency plan, how diligent it was, how correct it was for the circumstance. And so we had to adjust at different times, but overall it's gone fairly well. When you tell a utility from one day to the next, stop coming to work, the employee stop coming to work, it's not just stay at home. It's go home with the proper tools to keep on doing your job. So it was, did we have the proper bandwidth? Did we have the proper computers, laptop computers for employees to be able to take them home and do the job they needed to do? And so I'm happy to say that if you called SAWS on that Thursday, we let our employees go on Wednesday afternoon. And on that Thursday, the very next morning, if you called SAWS, you probably got somebody at home trying to solve your problem from their kitchen table or from wherever they were. So it's been, it's not the optimal way to run a utility, but I think we've been very successful in that. Our COVID numbers, as far as our employees getting contracted, it's a perfect mirror of our city. When our city numbers went up, we went up. When they went down, we went down. Right after Labor Day, right after Memorial Day, where we had those ugly spikes in June and July, we also went up. We have had our share of individuals getting this disease, this virus, probably in the number of around 80, 85, which is again, percentage-wise, almost the same as the city. And so we've had to adjust to that. We've done things, for example, when our crews show up in the morning, they usually would go inside the building and get their work assignments for the day. Now we have the gathering places out in the parking lot before they pick up their vehicles and their assignments for the day. And so a lot of those kinds of adjustments we've looked at and we've still want to do and are able to do provide the services that we provide. The key to this is when this pandemic is over, what are we going to learn from what we did? We have found out that there's some individuals that blossomed working from home. Other departments, maybe not so much. So it's up to us as the leaders of the organization, I'm sure Paul agrees with this, to whatever worked and is beneficial to our utility and our public, we should continue to do, and then learn from the circumstances that happen as to what could have been done better.
Okay, a key measure for the city and county is our positivity rate, that after falling below 5% for the first time in 6 or 7 months, that's inched back up to 5% and a little bit over. So are you still having those who can work remotely? Paul, I know you have a new headquarters building that you're literally in the process of moving into, I think, but maybe not actively having a workforce in there yet. What's the situation in terms of the people that can work remotely? Are you allowing them to still work remotely, and are they opting to do so?
Yes. One thing that we try to do at SAWS is follow the city's guidance. And I think CPS does the same thing. You don't want one of the two utilities doing something directly opposite that the city is doing. So our planning, our conversations are held in conjunction with the city. We have notified, this was way back in August, notified our employees to plan to stay away working from home through the end of the year, through January 1st. If for some miraculous reason things changed, we would give them adequate notice, 45 days notice before they had to physically come back to work. And so that has worked well. The employees appreciated that information because they, not only were they SAWS employees, as you mentioned, they were mothers and fathers of school-age children. They had elderly parents maybe to take care of. So the surety of knowing that they didn't have to report to work, at least without 45 days notice, gave them that security to be able to continue to do their job. And so everything from taking temperatures before they come in to the building, it's still happening. So if you go to the SAWS headquarters from right now, it is very sparsely populated. The majority of our workforce has to go out in the field. So the majority of our workforce, maybe this doesn't affect them as much. They're doing the work out there of digging ditches and fixing pipes. And so the office workers are the ones that mostly that are working from home.
And Paula, how about at CPS Energy?
Well, very similar. We just for context though, we had broken our company up into 3 teams, and so our blue team, that for our fearless workers, our skilled craft workers, union workers, they are the ones that primarily have to be out there for emergent work, for storms, just the regular business. So as Robert says, they're always out there, and we support them, and we actually try not to force them to come into the different locations as much as possible. And then we have a white team in the middle, and they are the group that has to come into the office because we have firewalls and we have to keep the grid secure. We have a lot of controls that we have to pay attention to. So there's a small group of people, well, several hundred, that have to do that. And they're all over the locations, but they're also located in our headquarters site. And then we have the orange team, and they're primarily most of the workers in the office. But we have a wide range of workers. We have attorneys and accountants and engineers and nurses, more nurses now, obviously for real reasons, just marketing professionals. They have all figured out how to work primarily from home. They come in if they need to, but most of the time, most people have been able to work successfully from home. We are not rushing in any way to force people to come back into the office because, again, a carelessness or just a mishap, somebody lets their guard down, takes their mask off, then you end up with potentially company spread. We're going to be, our comment is we're going to be one of the last ones. We'll be the first ones into this physical distancing and one of the last ones out. And so what people did is we moved out of our location, primarily the one that we've been in for decades, and people, really threw a lot of things away. We did a big bio cleaning effort, and then we moved in a very organized way into the building. And so that was all staged. People could take their belongings in there, but it's a very open concept. We can't wait to make it open for the public to see and come have tours. The way it's designed, people can actually move about the building and kind of be on different floors. All of our customer success people, all of our energy advisors, they're all on the 3rd floor, which spans both buildings. People will be able to come in as our guests and watch that and look at it. But right now, all that can occur remotely because we've been able to invest the time and effort in virtual solutions. So we'll be methodical and we'll be careful, and what we don't want to do is contribute to community spread or company spread, and just keep everyone safe.
Okay, and before we leave the subject of your new headquarters, Paula, some time ago, CPS Energy put out a request for proposals for the sale of and reuse of all your properties there along the Riverwalk. And you announced many months ago that you were in negotiations with a sole potential buyer. What's the status of those negotiations now on a potential sale, which I know it's your intention to use the proceeds from that to offset the costs of the new headquarters?
Absolutely. I mean, and we're still on track. As you would imagine, I think they too have been trying to figure out how to manage the potential buyer through this process, but they're still intact and they're still working on the process. We believe that we're going to close by the end of the calendar year. And so that would be great. Again, we will, exactly as you say, use those proceeds. And we've been selling multiple properties over time for that purpose, to defer the costs and keep the cost down. There's no debt on the building. And so we really want to make sure that it is a very affordable building. It's very practical. There's a lot of just natural, cement floors, just sealed. I mean, it's very workable and comfortable. It's not, it's practical. And so in every way, but that also, we thought about the cost consciousness of it. So everything seems to be on track right now.
You referred to them as they. Do you want to make some news today and share with us who they are?
No, I don't. You mean the potential buyer?
Yes.
Okay. Well, no, the potential buyer. So we don't choose to keep that information confidential. The buyers do. And so, but as soon as we can make that public, we will. And we'll give you a call.
You know where to find me.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about ratepayers, customers. Brendan Gibbons, our reporter at the San Antonio Report, who covers energy and the environment, has reported all along on the issue of delinquencies, which I think earlier this week or last week he reported they had spiked by 500%. at SAWS, Robert. So let's start with you on the issue of what people are going through. We've had 160,000 households experience unemployment. A lot of people don't have their health insurance. There's a lot of programs focused on workforce development, which we'll get into a little bit later. But how are each of you managing the delinquency problem? How big of a challenge is it to you? And how are you going to handle the issue of cutoffs versus giving people as much opportunity as they can to weather the pandemic?
Well, Bob, I'm proud to say that both CPS and SAWS chose to suspend our disconnection program before we were asked. We knew that this was the right thing to do, and we did it, especially for a water utility, because of the need to have a good hygiene about yourself when during this pandemic. Other utilities throughout the state and nationwide were forced to, either by public pressure or by some regulation that was enforced on them. And so we have had this disconnection program suspended since mid-March, since this pandemic started. And so those numbers have grown throughout the time period, and we've seen a very big increase in the number of households eligible for disconnection, over a 400% increase from the time this started, and that's over a 600% increase in the amount of money that is delinquent. And so we know that this is a problem, and we know it's a problem that we have to be very involved in to try to resolve. Right now, we're going through our budget for 2021. We've already presented the budget to the board, and they will hopefully accept it and vote on it in November. Part of that board tells the community that at a certain point within the year, we will start the disconnection program. And so the key is, when do you start it and how do you start it? And the reason it has to be in the budget is because we need to know what kind of revenue we can expect from those fees, the late fees and the disconnection fees, and the actual revenue from the customer. And so we have putting together a very elaborate outreach program for our customers to let them know what is going to be available to them. We understand that there's going to be a group of individuals that, no matter what, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to pay the entire bill, especially at one time, or even of 2 or 3 months. So what used to be a 2 or 3 month time frame that we gave our customers to pay their bills, we're going into different increments to where you can almost go all the way to 18 months to try to pay what you owe. But we are going to seek guidance from our board as to when that number should be. We have to give them a marker because of the budget. But surprisingly, and this is a testament, I think, to the work ethic of a lot of San Antonians, the delinquencies that we see are not necessarily from the poorest neighborhoods. They're in the middle income neighborhoods. And so what that tells us is that the poor are struggling and they still are paying their bills. And the middle income areas, they're the ones that are probably being hit by loss of a job. And this is the first time in their lives they've probably been caught in this situation. And so we have to have different types of programs to tailor to different kinds of individuals that find themselves in these particular circumstances.
And by the way, Paul, as I turn to you, we're not talking just about residential ratepayers, but in fact, there's a substantial number of businesses, probably mostly small businesses, that have ceased operations or are highly challenged, that have also that are also delinquent.
Yeah, it's devastating, and we do understand it. I'm from San Antonio, born and raised here. I grew up on the east side of town. My family has had challenges over the years. I don't have my parents anymore, but they would have never envisioned something like this, and we had it hard. And now we have a pandemic that has made a huge economic poor impression on our customers. And so we're thinking all the time what we can do to be helpful. Our general people first philosophy is we've got to help our customers get through this period. This too shall pass. We'll get through this. But right now it's hard to predict exactly when. So Robert's correct. I mean, we were glad to suspend disconnects And then even after that, we saw many businesses shut down, not come back. It's been across multiple industries, the hospitality industry in particular, small businesses, restaurants, but retail and some large employers, hotels. I mean, it's just a wide impact. And so we have thought very hard about how to help. And so we've had an outreach campaign to small businesses, medium businesses, larger businesses. They're managing, they're having their challenges, and they're looking for fairly sophisticated ways to make it through. But we do understand it's the person who has a home and has a small business, and they're trying to figure out how to make that happen. And so, as Robert says, we have payment plans. We have the ability to put someone on a payment plan, waive any late fees that would normally be customary, not charge those, and then look for ways that we can get funding to them. The residential energy assistance program that we have is for residents, but we've also tapped into the CARES Fund, working with the city and the county to particularly help businesses. And then also to reach out to other agencies in San Antonio to make sure that people know about these programs. So we created a complete outbound call function. We never had an outbound call function before. If you needed us, you called us, but now we understand how many customers actually need help. And we do understand that we're in a city that has a huge digital divide as well. I mean, we have the complexity of just about every challenge that we can have. And so again, we have our energy advisors who are just passionate about calling customers to make sure that they know about our programs, know about United Way programs, know about the food bank. We will search, we will look up, we will make phone calls. Again, anything that we can do to be helpful. We do worry because for us, bills are seasonal. So we have seen the bills go up tremendously as normal because it's so hot. That's what really drives the bills up. And so we're just going to keep calling, and we're going to exhaust all the funds that we have available. And we're going to keep tapping organizations to see if they have funds that can, again, help people. It is a zero-sum game in the utility business. There is no, we can't directly get CARES funds, and we can't qualify for government assistance. And so we're reliant on other entities to share that information. Hopefully there's another economic package. I don't know. Again, all of those things we know actually help. And we've had customers do everything from if we can get them and talk to them, they've given some of our energy advisors marriage proposals because they have somebody who's really just trying to help them brainstorm how to get there. And care for everyone who's our neighbors and our families and our friends.
Paula, you mentioned CARES Act funding. Mayor Nierenberg and City Council have dedicated a substantial amount of money, tens of millions of dollars, to workforce development initiatives to try to give the unemployed or people who have permanently lost their jobs some new skills and tools to return to the job market. And of course, there's a 1/8 cent sales tax initiative on the ballot, in which voters will decide whether to further invest in workforce development over the long term, the next 4 or 5 years. A lot of that money is for so-called wraparound services, things like daycare, things like transit, rental subsidies, and so forth, to allow people to be able to re-enter the workforce or to be able to re-enter training programs. Is there any thought, Robert or Paula, that you can turn to the city and say, maybe the solution to this, unprecedented delinquency issue is wherever there's financial need for us to wipe that off the books by using some of those funds, and therefore putting people in a position to get back up on their feet quicker, and at the same time for you to get back on budget?
Oh yeah, we have suggested that. Again, it's there is this thing about just stop charging people and waive those charges. San Antonio has some of the best rates in the state and in the country in comparison to the competitive markets. We don't do a lot of promotional rates. We just give people good rates all the time, but it's a zero-sum game. And ultimately, we have to make sure that everything is covered. And we also have to make sure that everyone else doesn't end up with the highest rates if we don't distribute the dollars correctly. So we have talked to them on multiple occasions, and that has spurred some of the money to come. A lot of it's going to rent, but some of the money has come in terms of helping on the utility bill. But if you can see the national stories building, that we have to have more conversation about this, because it is a big deal as well. And there is no source other than to work together and partner as you advocate, Bob.
We're also talking to the city on the same programs, trying to make sure that the SAWS customer is also looked at, also on the state level, some of the federal money that comes through the state, and even directly on the federal level, to make sure some of the legislation, if we do have another stimulus package, includes some relief for utilities, which really means relief for the actual customer.
So really nothing imminent on sort of final decisions, but that's going to be an issue that's deferred into the new year for action.
Well, we would hope that we would have faster movement than that, because people need peace of mind.
Mhm.
And again, they ask for those, is there anything else that can really, really help me, because I don't have a job yet. So we hope that it doesn't take way too long, but we do understand that there's a couple of other things happening this month alone. So, but we're just going to keep talking about it. And we do outreach at the federal level to explain the importance of helping our customers here across the nation. But we believe very much that we have a community that has a high need. And so we write letters and we make phone calls as well.
Paul, I know you're legally constrained, but Marina mentioned at the outset this petition that's been launched by the Sierra Club against CPS Energy to literally, in their words, not mine, decapitate CPS Energy and convert it into a department of the city of San Antonio. They're out trying to get 20,000 signatures by the end of the year to put that on the ballot in May when we have city elections. They've been joined by Move Texas, which we know is a pretty effective signature gathering enterprise of its own. What can you say about that? And if you are legally constrained, how does CPS Energy defend itself against the challenge?
Well, I am legally constrained. We can take no political position, particularly on anything that it will be on a ballot, and for or against. All we really can do is share the facts and the information and keep the conversations going. We are, this really is disappointing to us that this would be the approach used. San Antonio, I always say, we're puro San Antonio, right? We work together. There's only 2 degrees of separation. We know each other and we work together. And yes, we have been meeting with environmental stakeholders for 10 years. They are frustrated about a couple of important things to them. And we don't diminish the fact that it is important to focus on the environment. And we take that seriously. It's one of our major pillars. But our perspective is we have to do 2 primary things. One is to keep bills affordable. And here we are in the middle of COVID and economic pressure. And the things that if we move too fast, we will potentially cause rate shock in our community. And the one thing that people ask us is, well, what about an increase? We haven't had an increase in 6 years. But if we're not careful, if we stack and we're not focused on that, then someone has to pay that bill. Even though they may say there's a segment of the population that wouldn't have to pay, someone has to pay. And so the customer affordability, we get it from every demographic, make sure that's a priority. And we also get the comment, you got to make sure it's reliable. We believe in diversification. We have a huge amount of over 1,000 megawatts of wind. We have over 600 megawatts of solar. And we just put out a big global RFI to get people to help us solve those problems. So up to 900 more megawatts with solar, energy storage up to 50, and that's because it doesn't run long enough, and up to 500 megawatts of firming capacity. And so we've been talking to the environmental stakeholder group to say, we believe we can get there. We just need some time to make that happen. And we need to be able to do it again, because there's no funds that comes pay for this. Our energy efficiency program is paid. Everyone pays for that on their bill. The bigger you make it, the more expensive it is. Every time you put another piece of generation out there, whether it's solar or not, everyone pays for that. So unfortunately, we've gotten to this point where the focus has been on closing the coal units. One of them is only 10 years old. It can last longer. We don't plan to keep it out to 55 years. The point is, we have to make sure that we are very careful about potentially converting that to another type of low emitting to non-emitting technology. And then we have to shut down 5 other plants that are older and really need to be retired. So we keep talking to them about, we have these challenges and we want to partner because we've made the commitments. We have shut down 2 coal units in 2018, and you're well aware of that, our DLE units. We have, through our flexible path strategy, we made a commitment to reduce our emissions by 80% by 2040. And our board very much, they supported the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, which is the Paris Accord by 2050. Those aren't our gotta hit dates. Those are our maximum dates. And we've been working all the time to try to get there faster, but it doesn't happen overnight. And this management team has to be really, really careful about, again, doing the things that protects the stability of power for San Antonio and Texas. We have enough power. We generate 7% of all the energy in Texas, but our reserve margin, which means all the excess capacity we have, supplies about 12 to 13% of extra power for the state. And the grid is completely connected. So anytime that we introduce instability in the grid, it can affect San Antonio and Texas. We have the obligation to keep power on. We can't just do it because we can't make changes because of one consideration. It is about customer affordability, reliability, safety, resilience, environmental stability and responsibility. All of those things are important to us. And again, we have to make sure that we do it in a way that keeps the cost down for everyone. So, that we just we keep talking about what we've done. We have a great track record. We are known globally, not just in San Antonio, we're known globally. We've had 200 responses to our RFI, and about 10% of those came from other countries. Other countries are promoting our sustainability report. In German, I read it, there was a German press release. Look at San Antonio. I think we should be working together. I think that the impression that we have put out to the world that we can't resolve our issues and that we don't really want to celebrate our successes is not great. It doesn't really help. And we continue to stand ready to work with anyone to do better for San Antonio, because San Antonio deserves the best.
So the Sierra Club's position, if I'm not misspeaking, is that CPS Energy shouldn't be in the business of producing excess energy for sale to the grid. You would push back on that and say, number one, that benefits ratepayers here, but number two, it's part of a larger responsibility to be part of the grid.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of the megawatts are really set aside for San Antonio. When we have excess capacity, when we have to shut plants down for planned maintenance, still whatever's left over goes to San Antonio first. So what it really does is keeps us from being exposed to what historically ends up being cyclical periods of high prices. And that's how, even though your bill goes up because your power has to be used more because of the summer, we have really stabilized a lot of the volatility that we've seen because we can produce our own power. That's the primary thing. But making sure that the state has more than enough power. And there are times when we have, we're approaching up to 30,000 megawatts of wind, but there are times when only about 2,000 megawatts show up because the wind dies down so quickly. And so you have to have enough of what we call baseload generation to keep everything stable. It's a reliability perspective, and all of that keeps the prices down. So we're not out there, we're a cost plus business. That's it. We're not a high profit business. Whatever it costs, then that's what our customers pay. And we treat our customers like our investors. They are, that's the whole point. And so we don't have investors. We have debt investors. That's like having a mortgage. Other than that, that's what we do here. And so it's not because we're out there gaining profits. It's out there because, again, we're focused on reliability and affordability.
So you've been talking about the CPS Energy's Flex Power Bundle initiative, which you haven't used that title, but you're talking about all of these proposals that are coming in. And how would that reduce the 18% of energy that we're now getting from coal? Is that the intent, is to increase renewables over time and reduce coal, or will coal stay at 18% until all of those plants are shut down?
Well, there's a bit of complexity. The flexible path strategy is the broader one that we're going to utilize going forward. And what that basically says is we stay open to all the advances in the technology. And if we can, again, implement and bring in some proven new non-emitting technology, be it solar or whatever, we're very open. Hydrogen, ultimately we believe will be a big game changer. And we think there'll be other types of long-term storage, long duration storage. So we're open to all that. The Flex Power bundle in itself is just that first increment. And really and truly, it's targeted at some very old gas steam units. It's about reliability. So we need to get those, and there's 5 of them. And it's a large amount of capacity that we have to take care of, but we'll use that same type of strategy to go after what do we need to do on the coal units. Now, we do have options there. There's a potential to convert that to gas, what will lower the emission up front, or to close them if we can find new solutions to support it through other issuance of the Flex Power bundle in new stages. So we'll try to replicate that over time to make sure that we can get to those. That's next. Coal, but we're working on these like they're over 50 years old. And so at some point you have 2 cars. One of them's only 2 years old. And, it's not electric. You would love that to be an electric vehicle, but you have one that's like 20 years old, and you and your significant other have to make sure that you have a 2-car family for now. You'd like them both to be electric, but the timing of that matters. And that's kind of what we're focused on now.
Robert, I haven't forgotten about you, but water seems almost simple right now, given the situation that Paula is managing. So talk a little bit about water, and frankly, we could probably start with the fact that the Vista Ridge project, which itself once was so much controversial, is now complete, is it not?
It is. And I do want people to appreciate that these water projects do not come, from one year to the next. For example, the Vista Ridge project that came online this April 2020, we first started this project way back in 2012, talking about it. 2014, the contract was signed. So it takes a long time to get water projects off the ground in Texas. So Vista Ridge, to me, was a very unique water project. San Antonio has been chasing a large supply of water other than the Edwards since the 1950s. In the 1970s, if you all recall, it was Canyon Lake. The 80s and 90s, it was Applewhite. 70s and 90s and 80s was Applewhite, and then we had the LCRA project, the Guadalupe River project. These all were designed to bring in over 50,000 acre-feet of water into San Antonio. And they were not successful. And the reason was not money or engineering issues. Those can happen. It was the political issues and it was the environmental issues that kind of stopped those in their tracks. So Vista Ridge, we had to do it a different way. And what we essentially wanted to do was not have to go through that again, not spend the millions of dollars of ratepayer money before you got a single drop of water. And so what we did, we told the private industries out there that if you bring water to our doorstep, we will pay you for it. You do everything else. You get the environmental permits, you get the permits if you have to cross a river or railroad track, you get the rights of way, you do all the financing, you handle all the labor, all the construction, you get you drill the wells, but most importantly, you get the permits from the groundwater district that allows you to bring the water out of the ground and transport it to San Antonio. That's the unique part of it. That's where at any given time, a locally elected or locally appointed groundwater district can say, even though we gave you a certain amount of permit, we're going to cut it in half. We're going to cut it in a fourth, whatever it is. And all of a sudden you have stranded infrastructure. You have infrastructure that you have to pay for, and you don't have the revenue coming in, the water coming in to be able to pay for that. So we transferred that risk to the private sector. This did cost this did result in a higher cost of the water. Today, it is expensive water. In 5 years, in 10 years, it will not be so, because what we negotiated was the same price that you pay today, you will pay it in 30 years. So as the years go along, we will see how this price of water just stays stagnant. Other projects throughout the state will increase. And even in year 31, we have already negotiated from year 31 to 60 years a reduced price for this project, for this water. So in year 31, the price drops. And so we feel that this is a very unique project to the state and actually to the entire United States. It is the largest 3P project, water project in the United States. It is something that finally will provide water security for San Antonio throughout our generation, all the way into the 60-year project into the 2070 time period.
It increased the total water supply by 20%, correct?
Yes, and Paula talked about diversity. That's very important. You never want to have all of your eggs in one basket, whether it's finances, especially in the power industry, and especially in the water industry. And so we have true diversification now. It has allowed us, for whatever reason, to limit our dependence on the Edwards. What that does is allows our neighbors to also enjoy the benefits of the Edwards, and knowing that the Edwards is still very pristine, very plentiful, very inexpensive water, we still have that as a big water source for us, the bulk of our supply. But we're very diverse now. We have 15 water sources from 15 projects from 9 different sources.
So fortunately, we're not in a moment of deep drought right now, but we know sooner or later we'll cycle back into it. The Vista Ridge water, as much as it raises your total inventory and diversifies your sources, that's not going to change any of the conservation methods that are currently on the books.
No, it does not. And it does not for a lot of reasons. In particular is we don't want it to. We have a very strong conservation ethic in San Antonio and at SAWS. And we consider water conservation not a feel-good measure, not an environmental measure, but we consider it a water supply. So that water security that I talked about into 2070s includes having to conserve water because we need that amount that we're saving to make sure we meet the demands throughout the years as our community grows. So although we have reduced our consumption per person per day over 50% in the last 30, 40 years, we still need to drive that number down as we progress. So a lot of the critics are saying Vista Ridge is going to cost us in losing our water conservation ethic. It will not. We have to continue it. As a matter of fact, we are still being recognized by the national industry on all of our water conservation programs. We still have a very high participation, even during this COVID pandemic, as far as people using our conservation programs for whatever needs they meet. And we have specific tailor-made programs for people and businesses so that whatever their situation is, it's not just do this, but it's tailor-made for their specific situation. So that's how much of a importance we put on water conservation. And water conservation also, in my opinion, is by example. And one thing I want to tell the community out there that may have a concern about water conservation, I came from the state legislature where I was filing and passing water conservation bills in the 1990s, the early 1990s. So I'm not a Johnny-come-lately. I want SAWS to continue this conservation ethic throughout the time period I'm there, that it's so ingrained that it goes beyond my time there.
We'll talk more about that in a minute, but before we leave Vista Ridge, Robert, it was anticipated all along early on that some of the excess water inventory that you would accumulate as it came down from Burleson and Williamson counties could be marketed to other municipalities, water utilities, regional partners. How did that work out? I know we haven't been in a period of drought where the demand increased, but is that a viable part of the business plan?
Well, it's still viable in a sense that it's a plan. It's not something that is set in stone yet. One of the things that we're working on, for example, right now, entities, if they buy a water right, they want it for a very long term, at least 30 years. And so if we're going to sell some of this water, we have to look at potentially selling it, and therefore we're not able to have it for that 30 time period. So that's one of the issues. Another issue, for example, is that we can't, we want to make sure that the production from the source community, Burleson County, those wells and that aquifer can sustain itself for at least maybe 2 years in the pumping of the water that comes over here, so that we know what amount of water we potentially have to sell. And again, this is not something that you can do overnight. It has to take in community involvement. has to take our board to give us the direction of actually selling that water, and also city council, because we can't just set a price on whatever we want to sell. It has to have a rate set by the city council. And so there's going to be that kind of involvement by city council. So although the opportunity is there, we are still looking at it and still doing all of the due diligence to see if we can sell some of that water.
Okay. Back to conservation. One of the key conservation tools you have is pricing. So people that use a moderate amount of water or a modest amount of water who do conserve at home or in their businesses, they pay a standard rate. Those that choose to use more water, the rate goes up as the consumption goes up, to the point where people that are using massive amounts of water to irrigate non-native landscapes on very large lots are paying a substantial price. You hear people that get water bills as much as $1,000 or $2,000 a month in some of in some instances. We recently reported, going back to Brendan Gibbons again, that people who are in municipalities outside the city of San Antonio are thwarting that by privately drilling wells and getting access to aquifer water that is unmetered by you or by the Edwards or anyone. And they have an unlimited access to that water, and in turn are not contributing financially to the water utility, to SAWS, as a result. I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about that trend. It surprises a lot of people that it's even legal to do, and that I guess state permits are sought, and then people drill their own wells.
You know, so many things are legal just because it's not illegal. In other words, a regulatory agency, a city, a county, a state has not made it illegal. The city of San Antonio has a city ordinance that if SAWS provides water to you, you cannot drill your own well. And so that's well known within the city of San Antonio. The regulation is there and it is enforced. Obviously, the city of San Antonio doesn't have authority over some of these outlying suburban communities. And yes, there is a movement in Alamos Park to drill wells and get out from having to pay these water bills. And these water bills are huge because they use a huge amount of water. And it's not because our rates are so high. Our rates are uniform throughout the city. The only difference is whether you live inside the city or outside the city limits. And so their water bills are high because they use a lot of water, and they're trying to get out of this. And that's perfectly their right until someone chooses to regulate it. So if the city of Alamos Park or any other municipality chooses to regulate that, then obviously it is up to them. But we at SAWS have that protection within the city of San Antonio jurisdiction. Another thing that we need to recognize is that although some of these individuals will be drilling their own wells, they will not give up their SAWS account. They still want SAWS there. Why? In case their pump goes out, in case there's maintenance needed on their pump, in case there's a drought and they can't get any more aquifer water. They still need and want that redundancy of SAWS, which all of SAWS ratepayers pay for.
Well, and I'd take that one step further and say that you're delivering water that's safe and clean. And so people, even though they drill their own wells, they're doing that for landscaping, but they're relying on SAWS for their source of clean, potable water that's coming into their houses for cooking, cleaning, their own sanitation.
Exactly, and it's perfectly their right to do this. But let's be transparent. Let's tell everybody what it is and what it entails and what it's asking of all the other SAWS ratepayers.
So it's legal, but it also seems to be gaming the system at the expense of everyone else.
I agree, yes.
We've reported on recent wells drilled in Alamos Park, Robert. I know of others in Terrell Hills. We don't have a comprehensive inventory of how many of those wells exist outside of the city of San Antonio, but both SAWS and CPS Energy, of course, have a service, a geographic service area that goes well beyond the city of San Antonio. Do you have that information? Is it common knowledge how many wells? There's dozens, hundreds, thousands? Does anybody know?
They do have to get permits. And so you would have to go either to the Edwards Aquifer Authority. They have a way of, because even if you're drilling a well and it's not into the Edwards, they still have a right to know to make sure that they protect that source. So there are a couple of places that the governmental entities at least have to have that information. Not necessarily that they can regulate it, but they would have that information.
So you talked about the San Antonio City Council's ordinance prohibiting residents or businesses inside the city limits from drilling their own well. Do you have the authority at SAWS to notify other municipalities that if they want SAWS service in their geographic region, that they need to cease and desist the practice?
No, because of that geographic area that you talked about. The benefit is that you have exclusive right to provide service there, but you also have the obligation to provide service there.
Okay, so you're legally constrained from what you can do other than observe the phenomena.
Right, and again, SAWS has no ordinance making powers. They would have to come from the city of San Antonio to direct us that we would need to do something like that.
Okay, let me just take a break because we're at the 1 hour point. We've got another 30 minutes. I want to remind all of our viewers that there is a question and answer option here. I'll be happy to stop asking my questions and start asking your questions if you want to pose those. We have plenty of time left, and I'm sure both Paula Gold-Williams and Robert Puente would be interested in your questions and what we haven't talked about today that you would like to hear them talk about. I'm anticipating one subject that you may want to hear them talk about is compensation. And the reality is, for a leader that's in the public eye, who's either supported by ratepayers or taxpayers, compensation for the top executive is always an issue. Most notably in our community, a couple of years ago, when the firefighters union and the city of San Antonio were engaged in a very contentious standoff over a new contract, the firefighters union went out with a number of petition drives to put on the ballot various initiatives that were intended to impact city government. One ballot initiative that did make it and that was passed reduced the compensation for future city managers to, I believe, $300,000. So our former long-serving city manager, Cheryl Scully, at the time was making about $475,000 a year with a potential $100,000 bonus, which I don't think she ever collected, or she declined to collect it. I know you've declined to collect a bonus before, Robert. But now the new city manager is literally at $300,000, which is akin to what the city managers, by the way, in Bryan, College Station, or Edinburgh, or Corpus Christi make. So that tells you about that limitation. Paula, you're the highest compensated official in the conversation here in San Antonio. I think in 2019, between salary and bonus, that you made in excess of $900,000. Robert, I think you were more around $500,000 plus $100,000 bonus. So how do you find yourself having to constantly defend what compensation is appropriate for individuals in your office, and how you keep that from being a distraction to operations?
You know, to make it easy, maybe I should defend Paula and Paula could defend me.
Be my guest.
You go first, Paula.
Well, look, I don't in any way tell anyone that I don't make a lot of money. I do, and I appreciate that. But there were many times in my life that I didn't make a lot of money, and it is sad to me that anytime somebody disagrees with you, they go after this most emotional thing about compensation. And I've heard things about, but you make more money than the president, and that's not fair. Well, there's two different jobs. The president's job is enormous, but he has Air Force One, security for life, a wonderful White House, and many other things, and his service is important, his and maybe hopefully one day hers. And look, for an organization that's, again, I'm not taking a political position, but making a big deal about my compensation because they think that's the most emotional thing that they can do. Isn't that outrageous? And instead of, when they say oftentimes Black Lives Matter, instead of saying that there's a Black woman who's the only utility executive female in the globe, running a large organization, doing the right things, who grew up in this city, went to school in this city, went to college in this city, raised her children in this city, and then somehow made it seem like I'm somebody else. I don't like the fact that this sends the wrong message to young women and minorities, that you're a business owned by a community and you're doing a job. And for a fact, I make probably less than 30 cents on the dollar compared to my peers. But the politics of this is, do Black Lives Matter, or are we just making politics? And versus, we're excellently run. Global awards, we bring the best to San Antonio. We think globally and we act locally. And so again, I don't sit here and say it's not important, but we are here trying to do a really great job and trying to help students and businesses and customers. And then you take this completely, not you, but this argument is taken completely out of context. It was sad what happened to Cheryl. Not from a politics standpoint. She's an amazing leader, but they made it about her compensation. And so is it about going after women? Is it about going after minorities? Is it about making some extra thing? When in fact, our job is to run utilities. We are businesses owned by a community that we love, So.
And before I go to you, Robert, I want to say that somebody just from the audience shouted out amen, Paula. So we'll get that on the record.
And you know, and Paula didn't even mention that she competes with the private sector. I dare to say that Paula could quit today and tomorrow she'd probably be making twice as much in the private sector. But what struck me also is what she said about where she came from and who she is. And I could probably say the same thing. I'm also from Southeast San Antonio. I went to Highlands High School, and you would think that the majority of the people would be proud of one of their own who made it, who despite whatever circumstances I was in, I made it. And so I don't want to necessarily apologize for what I make, but I do want to recognize, and I do recognize what I make. I recognize that it is an amount of money that's much, much higher than the average individual here. And I don't take it for granted. I recognize what that says and what that means. But I do know that the people that are objecting to the Vista Ridge project use that emotion of what I make to further their gains. And so let's be honest and let's understand where we're coming from and what we are attacking. The petition drive against CPS Energy and the petition drive against SAWS are very different. And it is true, essentially the petition drive against CPS would make them a city department. And I challenge anybody to look at a city department in anywhere in the United States that can be as well run as CPS is being run outside of the political realm of City Hall. I have the luxury also of running a utility where I don't have to worry about airports. I don't have to worry about a police contract. I don't have to worry about potholes. I can concentrate on water and wastewater. And guess what? We have some of the lowest rates in the United States and some of the lowest rates in Texas. And so what are you looking for as far as lowering the pay of a future CEO? Because I've been there already 12 years. Just like Cheryl, I have options. I'd rather have them be made on my own, but still, it is something that I hope our community out there recognizes, that if you happen to have two homegrown individuals that have made it, and you want something else, Vista Ridge, coal plants, go after those issues.
Well, I think that the noise is loud, but it's not broad. And I think most people look with pride at the fact that a Black woman is leading our energy utility and a Latino male is leading our city utility. And probably most people that are members of the Hispanic Chamber would argue, let's start paying competitive rates, keep our best talent and attract talent, and stop talking about being a cheap date city where we pay low wages, which has not gotten us anywhere. So I wanted to give you both the opportunity to talk about that. But I also, without promoting Brendan Gibbons unduly, would note that he did take a deep dive into compensation across the country in your two sectors, and it's an argument for paying you what you're being paid, the data as opposed to the emotion. So there you go.
And as uncomfortable as speaking about our own particular salaries, I do appreciate you bringing it up. I do appreciate that article from Brendan that showed that my pay was right in the middle of what individuals are paid, and that her pay was actually lower, as she mentioned, than some of her colleagues in the private sector.
I think that's important. The other part of this conversation is what you contribute to the city, which is so essential. And Paula, there's right now the Sierra Club seems to want the Austin Energy City of Austin model. But talk a little bit about CPS Energy revenues that go to the city and what percentage of the city budget that represents, which is at risk if this petition gets on the ballot and people would decide for some reason to support it.
I absolutely will. You know, the city was, you know, they determined that they wanted to control their energy destiny, and in 1942 bought the utility for $34 million. We are now approaching $8 billion of returns. So we send back, as our one of our trustees, Trustee Kelly would say, we send back on average about $1 million a day back to the city for them to help run the services that we really need across our community. We don't have any say in that. That is all done by the council, which is great. But we understand it. I think the real key part of it, though, is we send that back, and we have probably the highest combination of rate and dollars. So we're sending it back about $350 to $360 million a year. And the key to that is we still have some of the lowest rates in the nation and the state. And so we take it, we're constantly trying to save money so that that important money goes back, the return happens, the city's credit rating is high, CPS Energy's credit rating is high, prices are low, value is high, and we take it extremely seriously. And you know, there are comments about, well, what will happen if it becomes a department of the city? I do know there are other structures that do have, there is no board, there is just a council, and they can work. Those contributions back to the city typically are much lower, and there are more issues around that. How do you differentiate that from parks versus the utility? As Robert says, you really need to keep your utility perspectives pure. It's a complex business. Everybody across the globe is trying to find the same solutions. I talk to CEOs in Germany and Australia and Amsterdam and Japan. We are all trying to find the same solutions, which takes 100% focus. It is weird to me that anybody would take and say that the city council, which is already super busy, doing a ton of things, can spend as much time on the utility as they do on every other thing. That's how big we're about as big as they are. It doesn't really make sense. Having an independent board that oversees, and our board is diversified. We have so much diversified talent. We have an attorney, a past Secretary of State. We have a real estate financial expert. We have an IT and cyber expert who we really need to make sure that we're working with, because again, we have to keep the security. And we have a superintendent that helps us focus again on education and business and has a deep understanding. In his early career, he was in different energy businesses. They give us the perspective that we need to make sure that we think of customers first, run this business well, send the money over, and keep our rates affordable. Number one concern of customers. And so we know our formula works. It's worked for 78 years. It's not that we're not changing. We are changing. Somebody says, well, you need to do something different. We are changing. We're leaders. We're number one in solar in Texas. We're number one. No, not someone else. We are. We've been top in wind. We've received national awards for our energy efficiency and conservation plan. People act like we're not doing anything. We're doing a ton of stuff. The argument is, how fast can you go? We will go as fast as our community can afford us to go and keep the power reliable. And we do that all, again, making sure that we're sending that money over and we're conscientious about everything we do, every dollar we spend. And the last thing I'll say is, when people say things like close your plant, just like that, there are people who have devoted their lives to run these plants for the security and the reliability of this community. They got out of high school and they've been working at that plant, different plants. And their careers, their livelihoods, what they do, their passion for the community manifests in the things that they do every day. We don't look at it as you snap your fingers. They can do other things. We can retrain them as we find new technologies. They'll be open. But just like we don't want our customers to be put out of work, we don't want to put more people out of work. We want to do it in a partnership and make a transition, an evolution that works for the community and still does it and doesn't skip a beat in terms of our commitments. That's what we're doing.
And I know from other conversations that the Mayor Nirenberg, and the city manager, Eric Walsh, they want no parts of bringing CPS Energy into the city fold. They recognize that the system that's been set up and has been in place for decades has been a mutually beneficial one. And I think there's quite a bit of astonishment actually among a lot of people that have observed this over the decades and have seen the subject expertise that your respective boards bring to the governance issue, which you don't have that subject expertise within the city staff that Eric Walsh oversees. There's astonishment that there could be a petition to unravel this. So it is important, I think, to note that this isn't something the city and its leadership are campaigning for at all.
Well, the one thing I will add, the city business itself is its own specialization, and it has a whole different rhythm of things that it needs to do. A utility can be municipally owned, but we do the exact same things that the large IOUs do, and it requires its own specialization. Robert and I got an interesting question not too long ago. It said, why don't you just consolidate the water company and the energy company? Well, he runs a strong organization that is operated extremely well, and so do I. And I said, that is like combining the Spurs that we love with the Dallas Cowboys, two great Texas teams, but the skill level and the things that we need to do are different. Maybe we can share exercise locations and training camps and different stuff like that. But as far as the team and the expertise, it's different. And so it's different for the city team, and we respect each other. Eric and Robert and I talk frequently. We make sure that we're aligned and coordinated. We resolve issues. We're trying to leverage some new technology. We are very grateful that the SAWS board is very interested in having us work with them on bringing in and merging our metering system, which will save our customers money. And it'll help us leverage dollars. So we are very much into doing the right things for our community, but it takes expertise in all these different realms that don't have to be merged, and definitely don't have to be merged because of a political disagreement. It's politics and disagreement. Just because you don't agree with me, I don't have to make you do everything the way I have to have it done, right? I mean, I don't understand what happened here, but we can work it out and make it work together.
So we have an audience question of what that would do to economic development if either one of you were to see a change in the status of your respective organizations. But maybe while you answer that broadly, let me ask you about the efficacy of rate advisory committees, which you have one, Robert. You do not have one, Paula, but there's been conversation about it. My limited experience with yours is that sometimes those very democratic conversations can become quite dysfunctional with one gadfly involved. I'll just use the word. And so I just wonder if you'll talk about that experience, and Paula, whether or not you think that's a useful tool at this point in time for CPS Energy.
Yes, Rate Advisory Committee, we do it every 5 years. This is the year that we're doing it. And it's a committee of individuals, of citizens and interest groups that don't set the rate, but decide how to set the rate as to what it should be. You know, commercial versus residential, peak versus regular demand. And yes, we have a gadfly in this committee, and unfortunately, it often skews the issue because gadflies tend to be loud, and people are attracted by loud noises. One thing that is happening, however, in this current situation is we were going to use 2020 as the model, as the year to base our next 5 years of rates. Not the amount of what you pay, but how you pay. And as we now know, 2020 should not be used as the model, as the base of this 5-year period. So we have to look at 2021. And again, 2021 probably will also not be that year, because I doubt if miraculously right after the new year, we will have resolved this pandemic. Though if we find a vaccine, if we have something, there will still be that that lingering effects of afterwards. And so 2021 may not be the ideal year also. And so again, our current rate structure is one that you mentioned that has served us well, in the sense that if you use a lot of water, you're going to pay more for that water, not just by volume, but by the amount of each particular gallon. And so this causes that individual, that business, that individual, because these are residential rates, that if you're going to use a lot of water, you will know based on your usage that you're going to have a big bill. And if that's what is fine with you, because you want a nice, green, lush lawn, then fine. We have the water to provide for you, but at least the customer knows that that's what they're getting into. So this rate advisory committee, they provide us a lot of good information, because on these committees we have individuals that represent, for example, the hospitality industry, that represent the recycled industry, businesses that use that type of recycled water, individuals that represent small lots. Each council member gets an appointment. And so we will have a very strong cross section of users in this committee to tell us how we charge and what we charge and how it affects their particular either circumstance or business.
Okay, so a couple of things. I mean, I think that rate advisory committees are actually very common in the pretty common in the utility industry, whether it be water or electric. But so I think it can be helpful. I would also say, though, that there are some misconceptions. So we kind of we have an interest in actually having a group of people we can talk to make sure that we can give them more clarity of information, and then they can help us think better about design. Here's one of the misconceptions. So it's an economies of scale business, meaning the more you run your power and the more efficient you are, the lower the price per unit is. I mean, that's just, your economics class. And so people have said, well, the price per unit for a large company is lower, so they must be getting better rates, and accordingly, the average citizen is spending too much per unit. Well, the issue is we need those big customers, because they level out all of the load in San Antonio, and it correlates with big employers and their use of energy, so that you actually get jobs and you actually get a very level usage, and it makes it more economic, and it keeps our prices low the more we have business. And that's why we want to help economic development and make sure that we have more businesses coming in because of the way that they use their load. Overall, their per unit price, the price of a kilowatt hour may be lower, but overall, their fixed fees and their total bill is much higher. So here's the concept. 88% of the customers are residential, right? And so that only is like 12% that are industrial and commercial. But the industrial and commercial make up about almost 40% of the revenues. The subsidy is already coming from the business community. And we want to be able to spend some time and talk about why that matters. Most people think, well, golly, the businesses should just pay more. They should help, and the bills for residents should be discounted. Actually, the energy bills for residents, people pay about 95% of their actual cost of service, and businesses pay somewhere about 105% to 108%. It already happens. And in fact, I've talked to businesses about it. People give businesses, they're being greedy. And when I explain it to them, and I go, look, these are your employees, and if you don't take that premium, then your employees have to pay a higher price. And what I find is businesses are like, okay, and they're like, okay, I can, and solar's great, just keep my power on. So the ability for us to be and talk to a group that can look at that in more depth and really see the realities of the way the rates are designed. And if we want to change that design, do it thoughtfully, because you can have unintended consequence, and we can end up being the most expensive energy market here if we don't do design well. So I do think that in general, the rate advisory committee helping to do that and to look at our rates and look at new offerings and new products and services are great. Rate increases are the responsibility of the board and the council, and the board and the council have to keep those intact. Those are required for our bond ordinances. The people who loan us money to make our bills affordable, we have about $6 billion in debt, expect us to make sure that we very carefully go through a process that is tied to our pure governance, not to a committee that may have a gadfly or may have ulterior motives for one objective. We want people to think about all of San Antonio and to be fair, and how do you migrate to cleaner technologies and blend in these extra solutions for energy and do it right and do it well. And again, don't cause rate shock. So we believe that we can really optimize as management. We believe we can optimize a rate advisory committee. We are concerned some people will just want to do it because they want to control every decision that management makes, and they don't necessarily ask everyone what's important to them. It's their sole objective to do something, i.e. close a coal unit sooner rather than later, which is not a horrible goal. But again, if you do it and you cause rate shock, have we really done the right things? And here's what really happens. People they end up with less capacity. And so when they need power, what they do is they go out to the market. You're in Texas. So what are you going, when you go out to the market, what kind of power are you getting? Probably gas and probably some elements of coal that remains. So we believe that we can solve these problems and have physical electrons and molecules here that are converting, and people can know that the air is getting cleaner because we're making the right decisions. A rate advisory committee can give us counsel. We can talk about how do you do it over time, not forever, but time frame that really works. And how do you do it again to be sensitive to the people who can't pay? And the last big misconception is that high consumers of energy are all rich. That's a misconception. There are people who are not wealthy, who are income challenged, and their bills are high because their houses are tight. And we keep trying to help them and make them more efficient. So again, trying to go after this concept of there's bad people out there and people that don't care. I don't see it in San Antonio. And I believe that a rate advisory committee that is, working together, working for the right things and not just trying to control, can do the right things for San Antonio.
So it really comes back to expertise again and making sure that's always at the table. Let's just look out over the horizon at rates. Robert, if I'm not mistaken, the rate increases that have financed the Vista Ridge project have already all been implemented. And in your 2021 budget, which will start in January, is there another rate increase?
You're correct. The Vista Ridge rate increase has been implemented and it's part of the books now. Our 2021 budget does not show a rate increase necessary to meet the needs that we have. And we are probably looking also at 2022 without a rate increase.
We talked earlier about delinquencies, which have totaled in the many millions of dollars for SAWS. Can you absorb those next year without a rate increase?
Yes, and the reason is that just like you have to have an operational plan for emergencies, you also have to have a financial plan for emergencies. And so one of the things that we have done at SAWS, again, this goes to the petition drivers that were very well run financially and operation-wise. So financially, we have throughout the previous years set aside a certain amount of money for these types of emergencies. And if the emergency doesn't happen, well, then guess what? You can use part of that money to meet capital needs so you don't have to borrow as much and pay the borrowing cost. And so, yes, we will be able to absorb this for the following year, just like we were able to absorb any other circumstance that happened. The big issues for SAWS will always be the weather. Whether it's hot and dry or cold and wet, really dictate how much revenue we get from our customers and how we ultimately are able to spend that on their behalf.
Paula.
Okay, I'll try to go quick. It's again, two different companies, two different industries. We haven't had a rate increase in 6 years, and we've only had one in 9. And so We have conserved cash. We have been bringing our debt ratios down. We've been very disciplined, but ultimately we will have one. I mean, it's just inevitable to end up with a rate increase. Just like inevitably, you wanna make sure that your income is moving with the cost and increases in the economy. And so we know it's coming. We're going to do all we can, though, to keep staving it off for as long as we can. It's a bit harder for us because we were already in a situation where we were already tight. If we get to a point where we have, extremely high delinquencies, and I would say that our delinquencies on bad debt are probably 4 times what we saw in prior years. It's pretty significant, and we can't probably sustain that for a tremendously long time. So we think we're going to get through this year without any need. Our wholesale sales revenues, though, are a fraction. We've made about 150 million for the last several years, and this year is probably going to be somewhere around 40. So the whole economy has been impacted. And so between that and the bad debts, we know ultimately we will need one, but we haven't declared one yet because all we try to do is save money as much as we can. We try to push it out as long as we can. Next year, we might be needing to do one, and but we also understand that customers first. So we're going to try our best to still push it. So it's one of those things. But I know this, we won't ask for one more dollar than we need.
Okay. I think that puts a great exclamation point on a 90-minute conversation that went by very quickly. And on behalf of the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Marina, and the San Antonio Report, my team, it's been an honor and a pleasure, Paula Gold-Williams and Robert Puente, to spend the last hour and a half with both of you and looking at so much public policy that's so important and of such interest to everyone. Thank you very much. Marina, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for moderating this important discussion today. I do want to take a moment to thank our presenting sponsor, Toyota Motor Manufacturing of Texas, and of course, thank Paula and Robert for their leadership and their participation today. On behalf of the Hispanic Chamber, thank you to the viewers out there who watched. And if you would take a moment at the end of the webinar to take a quick survey, we want to hear directly from you. We want your feedback. We want to know how you think we're doing here and how our panelists are doing today. So please take a moment and complete that survey at the end. Stay safe, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Gracias. Adios.